Okay, so we're back now for the insertion of the ventricular portion, okay? And again, as we ended up, I was showing you the size of the holes, right? And you can see there's a hole there. It's pretty big compared to the tubing, remember? And then there's going to be two smaller holes in either side. One you can see is empty, one I have a screw in there. So the reason the screw's in there, and that is to secure it. Okay, so the shunt and the tubing is secured to the skull. Okay, and on this other one that I'm going to demonstrate to you, I have two screws. You can also see there's a third or an empty hole there. So in a case like this, I might use two. You might also notice that the hole is larger for this case. And there's a specific reason for that, okay? Because when you use the shunts that have a right angle like this, okay, where it goes directly into the ventricle, into the skull. Now, this only really works well in larger dogs. This system here isn't going to work well in small dogs. It's just not going to place as well. And it looks like you'd be like, oh, okay, that little bit, how big is that? And you're like, you measure it out and it's 5 or 6 millimeters. And so then you're like, oh, I'm going to drill a hole that's 5 or 6 millimeters. And then you drill it and you drill it really nicely. And you could do it something with a burr that looks like that. Right? Here's the thing, after you do that the hole will always be smaller than you want it to be, and this won't fit. So you're going to drill a hole, then you're going to place it, and you're like, oh, that's a little too tight. Then you're going to do it again, you're going to be a little too tight. And so you need it to be big enough to fit this end in, but also so that it sits nice and flush. So I'm going to show you this right angle system when I lay it down on the skull and how it's going to look. It's going to look just like that, okay? Now, sometimes there's little attachments here that have places that you can put the screws directly through. In other cases, they're not. If there's not, then you place these screws yourself, and then with suture material, okay, you're gonna go around the screw head, often incorporating the shunt tubing, or in this case, this valve itself. This is the valve, actually the pump here. And then you're going to go around this other screw. Now, you're not suturing this down like it's the be-all, end-all, because part of it's silicone, you don't want to crush it. But it needs to be secured enough so that it's not going to pull away from the skull. This pulling away from the skull and leading to leakage, well, that's not really going to work out well. Okay? So here's how it looks, like that. And then when you place this, you're going to just push it on there. It's going to look nice like that, okay? But now before you do that, you have this hole, and what's the first thing you're going to see through that hole? Well, it's going to be dura. And then underneath that, that's going to be cortex, and you're not really going to see it. So what do? Well, what I use is the bipolar cautery, and then I kind of fry all that dura that's sitting right there. After I've cauterized that dura, I then either use the spinal needle to then go through the dura. If the hole's big enough, you can actually use an 11-blade needle to kind of put a little X in there. That's what's often diagrammed. And then you have your thin cortices. Your cortices is very thin. And the shunt with the stylet, which is I have over here, like this with the stylet, that will push through parenchyma. So that's not a problem, okay? And here's how that's going to look. So in our little cat over here, and I'm going to use this one so you can see it a little easier with the blue, okay? You're going to cauterize, zap, zap, zap. Then you're going to use your stylet in here. You're going to push that through, and then you're going to bring that down. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to secure that to the brain. Secure that to the skull. All right, and it's going to look like this. So I've measured this out beforehand. I know how I want it to look. And this is what it's going to look like. That I have the elbow connector in there. The tubing is going through the hole. The elbow connector is through the hole as well. I've measured out how much of the tubing is going to go into the parenchyma, into the ventricle to collect the CSF. And then you can also see I have that screw. Okay? And there's a screw hole on the other side. And I will place another screw in there. And then what I'm going to do is basically go from screw to elbow and tubing to screw, and I'm going to connect that down so that it does not pull out. You can tighten this fairly tight as long as the plastic of the elbow is there, because it won't let you crimp the silicone. By itself, you can crimp the silicone, so do not ever ligate down really tightly on silicone, just gently, okay? And again, if you had a right angle one, like this, and you were to cauterize the dura, zap, 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 you were to use your stylet, you push that through, and then you're going to put this here, and once it's together and in the skull, it's going to look like that. Okay, now, one important thing that I left out, okay? When you attach the ventricular tubing to this right-angled shunt, trying to push it on here with my fingers. Come on, Pete. There we go. When you push it onto it like that, okay, this is your ventricular portion. Here's your valve. When you put that through, okay, you have to remember to put a ligature up here, okay? I'm going to demonstrate how that looks over here. So just give me a sec. Now this you can tighten down, and you should tighten down, and this should be either with silk or nylon. I don't care which one you use, okay? And this one you're going to tighten down, and you're going to cinch down. And that's where you're going to cinch it down. You're cinching it down because there's plastic, okay? Remember, that's feeding through the plastic. If you did that on the silicone alone, you would crimp it, okay? But it's over. The silicone tubing is over the piece of plastic. And so that you're going to secure and then cut your suture material very short, okay? I'm going to take this off here so you can see the part that I'm talking about. That even won't let me pull it off. There we go. Ugh. All right, see that portion right there? That's what you're tying the ligature. That's why you can crimp it down. It's because the tubing is going over that piece of plastic. Okay, otherwise you can't really do that. All right, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to place those screws and have this suture material, and I'm going to show you how that looks.